Slavery in the modern world, a reconstructed system of control. The assertion that slavery ended with the abolition movements of the 19th century is a myth. While traditional forms of chattel slavery, such as those seen in the United States and colonial Europe, may have been outlawed, slavery has not ended, it has merely evolved. The structures of control, exploitation, and domination have been restructured in ways that are far less visible and often disguised under the veneer of freedom, democracy, and economic opportunity. In this script, I will argue that slavery, in many forms, persists today, often in ways that are so embedded in societal systems that those who are subjugated do not even recognize themselves as slaves. I will provide evidence to support the claim that modern forms of slavery have been reconfigured, often operating under the guise of economic necessity, legal systems, and social structures that perpetuate exploitation without visible chains. To understand how slavery has been restructured, it is important to define what we mean by slavery. Traditional slavery is often defined by direct ownership and control over a person's labor and body, where individuals have no legal rights and are forced to work under threat of violence or coercion. However, in the modern world, this direct form of enslavement has been replaced by subtler mechanisms of control, which operate within the frameworks of legal systems, global capitalism, and social structures. These new forms of slavery are often invisible, so much so that those who are enslaved may not even recognize the mechanisms of their subjugation. One of the clearest and most pervasive forms of modern slavery is the concept of wage slavery. In capitalist societies, the economic system has created a situation where millions of people are forced to sell their labor for wages that do not allow them to fully escape poverty. This form of economic dependency traps individuals in a cycle where they are compelled to work in harsh conditions, often for low pay, in exchange for the basic necessities of life. Evidence of wage slavery can be seen in the prevalence of low-wage workers in sectors such as agriculture, retail, manufacturing, and service industries. These workers often face long hours, unsafe working conditions, and the constant threat of job loss. They are economically coerced into accepting jobs that do not provide for a decent standard of living. According to a 2021 report from the International Labor Organization, ILO, approximately 20 million people worldwide are in situations of forced labor, many of whom are trapped in low-wage industries, demonstrating the persistence of slavery-like conditions under modern economic systems. Moreover, debt bondage is another aspect of this modern slavery. Individuals, particularly in developing countries, may become ensnared in debt cycles where they are forced to work in subhuman conditions to pay off debts that never seem to decrease. The United Nations estimates that more than 40 million people are in some form of modern slavery today, a significant portion of which is tied to economic exploitation and debt bondage. Another stark example of modern-day slavery is found within the prison industrial complex. The United States, in particular, has created a system where millions of individuals, disproportionately black and brown people, are incarcerated and subjected to forced labor. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution abolished slavery except as punishment for a crime. This legal loophole has been exploited, leading to the mass incarceration of people who are then forced to work for little or no compensation. Prisoners in the U.S. are often compelled to perform labor for private corporations, in state-run industries, or in prison facilities under conditions that closely resemble slavery. While they receive a nominal wage, often less than $1 an hour, the work they do benefits major corporations and government entities. The prison system has effectively created a modern form of slavery where incarcerated individuals are stripped of their rights and treated as expendable labor. Furthermore, the racial disparities in incarceration rates are stark. Black Americans are incarcerated at a rate more than 5 times that of white Americans, and many of these individuals are forced into grueling labor with little to no compensation. The exploitation of prison labor has led some scholars and activists to argue that the prison system functions as a contemporary slave system, where racialized populations are incarcerated, controlled, and subjected to forced labor in a way that mirrors the dynamics of historical slavery. Perhaps the most explicit form of modern slavery is human trafficking, a global crisis that affects millions of people, particularly women and children. Human trafficking involves the recruitment, transportation, and exploitation of individuals through coercion, deception, or force for the purposes of forced labor or sexual exploitation. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNOC, an estimated 40 million people are trapped in human trafficking worldwide, with the vast majority being exploited for labor in industries such as agriculture, construction, and domestic work, or for sexual exploitation in the sex trade. Human trafficking is a covert and criminalized form of slavery that operates in the shadows, making it difficult to track or measure accurately. However, the prevalence of trafficking networks and the continued exploitation of individuals across borders point to a system that continues to thrive in the absence of widespread intervention and adequate legal protections for vulnerable populations. Victims of trafficking often suffer from psychological manipulation, physical abuse, and isolation, and many are unable to escape their captors due to threats, debts, or fear of retribution. Modern slavery is also intricately tied to global supply chains, where the goods and services that people in wealthier countries consume are often produced under exploitative conditions. Multinational corporations, in their quest for profit maximization, outsource labor to countries with lax labor laws or where workers are vulnerable to exploitation. This includes industries such as textiles, electronics, agriculture, and mining, where workers are often subjected to unsafe working conditions, extremely low wages, and even forced labor. For instance, the production of goods like clothing, electronics, and chocolate has been linked to forced labor in developing countries, particularly in parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Workers, including children, are often coerced into working in hazardous conditions, sometimes through debt bondage or threats of violence. Though consumers in wealthier nations may be unaware of the exploitation behind the products they buy, the reality is that modern slavery persists in global markets, with little regard for the lives of those at the bottom of the supply chain. Slavery, in its traditional form, may have been outlawed, but its core mechanisms of exploitation, coercion, and control have been reconstructed in ways that are often less visible and more insidious. Whether it is through economic systems that trap people in low-wage jobs, illegal exploitation of prison labor, human trafficking, or the hidden labor behind global supply chains, slavery continues to exist. The evidence shows that while the chains may be invisible, the subjugation is real. Modern slavery thrives in plain sight, hidden in the structures of our global economy, our legal systems, and our consumerist cultures. In order to confront and end modern slavery, it is necessary to recognize these hidden forms of exploitation and to challenge the systems that perpetuate them. Only then can we begin to dismantle the reconstructed forms of slavery and create a world where freedom, dignity, and human rights are truly accessible to all.